The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal towers of Ethos. Princess Lyrelei walked through the peaceful streets of the border settlement, her pale blue skin shimmering in the light. The Ethrani people moved around her with quiet grace, their thoughts connecting in gentle waves that felt like warm water flowing through her mind. Lyrelei loved these visits to the outer settlements. Here, away from the formal palace, she could feel the simple joy of farmers and craftsmen. Their thoughts were pure and honest. A baker worried about his bread rising properly. A mother sang a lullaby in her mind for her sleeping child. An old man remembered his late wife with gentle sadness. The princess touched the smooth walls of the crystal buildings as she walked. Each one hummed with stored sunlight that would glow softly when darkness came. Everything on Ethos was built for peace and beauty. The Ethrani had forgotten what war looked like many generations ago. That was their mistake. The attack came without warning. Black ships dropped from the sky like falling stones, their engines screaming loud enough to hurt Ethrani ears. The peaceful thoughts in Lyrelei's mind suddenly turned to terror and pain. She felt the fear of every person in the settlement hit her at once, making her stumble and fall to her knees. Forthac soldiers poured from the ships. They were huge creatures twice the size of any Ethrani, with thick gray skin and red eyes that glowed like hot coals. Their minds were different from anything Lyrelei had ever touched. Where Ethrani thoughts flowed like music, Forthac minds felt like broken glass and burning metal. The soldiers moved through the settlement like a storm. They carried weapons that fired bolts of energy, turning the beautiful crystal buildings into melted slag. The Ethrani people tried to run, but they were not built for violence. Their long, graceful limbs that worked so well for art and music could not carry them fast enough to escape. Lyrelei tried to reach out with her mind to call for help, but something was wrong. Her telepathic voice seemed muffled, like she was trying to speak underwater. The Forthac ships were broadcasting some kind of signal that made her thoughts feel heavy and slow. A massive Forthac warrior spotted her. His armor was covered in scars and his face showed cruel satisfaction when he realized who she was. The princess tried to run, but her legs felt weak. The warrior caught her easily, his huge hands wrapping around her arms like metal bands. "The little princess," he said in the harsh Forthac language. His voice sounded like grinding stone. "The emperor will be very pleased." Lyrelei felt terror unlike anything she had ever known. Not just her own fear, but the fear of every Ethrani in the settlement flowing through her mind. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The warrior injected something into her neck, and the world began to fade. The last thing she saw was the crystal settlement burning behind clouds of black smoke. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, Queen Thesara felt her daughter's fear like a knife in her heart. The queen was in her private garden when the attack happened, tending to flowers that grew in response to peaceful thoughts. The plants suddenly withered as waves of terror reached her through the telepathic network that connected all Ethrani. Thesara ran to the communication center, her flowing robes billowing behind her. Palace guards and advisors were already gathering, their faces pale with shock. The queen could feel their thoughts even without trying. Confusion, fear, and helplessness. "Report," she commanded, though she already knew the worst had happened. "Your Majesty," said Commander Aelith, his mental voice shaking, "the border settlement of Cathara has been attacked. We have lost contact with everyone there, including—" He could not finish the words. "Including my daughter," the queen said. Her voice was steady, but inside her mind, she was screaming. The communication officer, a young Ethrani woman named Vera, looked up from her crystal console. "We received one brief message before contact was lost. Forthac ships, at least a dozen of them. They came from the dark space beyond our borders." Queen Thesara closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, searching for any trace of her daughter. For a moment she felt nothing but empty space where Lyrelei's presence should have been. Then, faint as a whisper, she sensed her daughter's mind. Lyrelei was alive but far away and growing more distant with each passing moment. "They have taken her," the queen said. "The Forthac have my daughter." The room fell silent except for the soft humming of the crystal communication devices. Everyone knew what this meant. The Forthac Empire was famous for two things: their cruelty and their hatred of telepaths. They believed that minds should be private and that sharing thoughts was a weakness. Worse, they had learned to use captured telepaths as weapons, forcing them to break into the minds of prisoners. Commander Aelith stepped forward. His thoughts carried the weight of military training, but also deep uncertainty. Your Majesty, our fleet is prepared to launch a rescue mission. However, our ships are designed for exploration and research, not combat. The Forthac have fortress ships that are nearly impossible to attack. And we do not know where they have taken her, added another advisor. Forthac space is vast and well defended. They could be anywhere. The Queen felt the hopelessness of her advisors washing over her like a cold tide. The Ithrani were brilliant scientists and artists, but they had forgotten how to fight. Their weapons were designed to defend their home world, not to attack enemy ships in deep space. But Thesara was not ready to give up. She was a mother, and mothers did not abandon their children no matter how impossible the situation seemed. "Contact the human coalition," she said. The room filled with surprised thoughts. The humans were a new species to the galactic community. Barely 50 years since first contact. Most of the older races saw them as useful but dangerous. They were good at fighting, but they seemed to enjoy it too much. Their minds were chaotic and hard to read, full of contradictory emotions. "Your Majesty," Commander Aelith said carefully, "the humans are unpredictable, and this would be asking them to risk their lives for a member of our royal family. What could we offer them in return?" Queen Thesara thought about her brief meetings with human diplomats. Their minds had been difficult to touch, but she had sensed something in them that reminded her of Ithrani parents, a fierce need to protect those they cared about, a willingness to sacrifice everything for their loved ones. "We offer them something they understand," the Queen said. "We tell them that a child has been taken from her mother. We ask them to help us bring her home." She moved to the communication console and began composing a message. Her thoughts were heavy with grief, but underneath was something else. Hope. The humans might be chaotic and violent, but they had one quality that might save her daughter. They never gave up. The message went out across the galaxy, carried by quantum transmitters to the human coalition headquarters. In simple words, Queen Thesara told the story of her captured daughter. She did not ask for a diplomatic solution or offer trade agreements. She simply asked one parent to help another, and in a military base light years away, a human soldier named Marcus Chen would soon read those words and make a decision that would change everything. The human coalition base on Kepler Station buzzed with activity as usual. Soldiers moved through the corridors with purpose, their boots making sharp sounds on the metal floors. Unlike the quiet grace of Ithrani settlements, human military bases were full of noise and energy. Sergeant Marcus Chen sat in the mess hall, staring at his coffee without really seeing it. Around him, other soldiers talked and laughed, but Marcus kept to himself. He had learned long ago that getting too close to people only made it hurt more when you lost them. Marcus was not like the other soldiers. While they joked and made friends easily, he remained quiet and focused. His fellow soldiers respected him because he was good at his job, but they also thought he was too serious. They did not know about the dreams that woke him up at night, or the guilt that followed him everywhere he went. The call came over the base communication system just as Marcus finished his coffee. "All senior personnel to Briefing Room Alpha, Priority 1. Marcus made his way to the briefing room with the others. The room was full of maps and screens showing different parts of the galaxy. Colonel Harrison stood at the front, her face grim. She was a tough woman who had seen many battles, but today she looked troubled. "We have received a request for help from the Ithrani," she began. "Their princess has been captured by the Forthac Empire. Queen Thesara is asking for our assistance in getting her back." The room filled with murmurs. Everyone knew about the Ithrani. They were peaceful telepaths who had helped the human coalition with medical technology. But they were also known for avoiding conflict whenever possible. Lieutenant Torres raised his hand. "What kind of assistance are they asking for, Colonel?" "A rescue mission," Harrison replied. "Deep into Forthac space. Intelligence suggests the princess is being held on a mobile prison ship called the Iron Claw. It moves constantly through their territory, making it nearly impossible to track." Captain Williams whistled low. "That's a suicide mission. The Forthac have 3 full battle fleets protecting their prison ships. We would need an entire navy to get close to one." Colonel Harrison nodded, "which is why this will be a small operation. 1 ship, 1 soldier. A stealth mission designed to get in and out before the Forthac know what happened." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Whoever volunteered would probably not come back. The Forthac were known for their ruthlessness, and their prison ships were designed to be escape-proof. Marcus felt something stir in his chest. Not excitement, but recognition. He knew what it felt like to lose someone important. He knew what it was like to wish you could have done something, anything to save them. His mind went back to the farming colony where he had grown up. It was a small place on the edge of human space, where families worked together to grow food for the inner worlds. Marcus had been 17 when the raiders came, aliens from a species that humanity had never seen before, looking for slaves to sell in the outer rim markets. Marcus had been in the fields with his father when the attack began. They ran back toward the house, but they were too late. The raiders had already broken down the door. Marcus could still remember the sound of his sister Sarah screaming for help from inside. He had tried to save her. He really had. But he was just a farm boy with no training and no weapons. The raiders were professional killers with military-grade equipment. Marcus spent 3 days in the hospital afterward, recovering from the beating they gave him. Sarah was never seen again. That was why Marcus joined the military. Not for glory or adventure, but because he never wanted to feel that helpless again. He trained harder than anyone else, pushed himself beyond normal human limits, and became one of the best soldiers in the coalition. But it was never enough to erase the memory of his failure. "I'll do it," Marcus said quietly. The room turned to look at him. Colonel Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Sergeant Chen, do you understand what you're volunteering for? This isn't a normal rescue mission. The chances of success are extremely low." Marcus stood up. "I understand, Colonel, but someone has to try." Captain Williams shook his head. "Marcus, this is crazy. You'd be going alone against an entire enemy fleet. It's not a mission, it's suicide." "Maybe," Marcus replied, "but that little girl has a mother who's waiting for her to come home. And if there's even a small chance I can make that happen, then I have to try." The other soldiers looked at him with a mixture of respect and concern. They knew Marcus had lost his family, but they had never heard him talk about it. Now they understood why he was always so serious, why he never seemed to care about his own safety during missions. Colonel Harrison studied him for a long moment. "Very well, Sergeant. Report to the tech lab in 1 hour. They'll brief you on what we know about Forthac prison ships and give you the equipment you'll need." As the meeting broke up, Lieutenant Torres caught Marcus by the arm. "You don't have to do this, you know. There will be other missions, other chances to help people." Marcus looked at his fellow soldier. Torres was a good man who had saved Marcus's life more than once. But he did not understand. This was not about helping people in general. This was about a specific child who needed someone to come for her. "Yes, I do," Marcus said simply. An hour later, Marcus stood in the tech lab surrounded by screens and equipment. The technicians showed him detailed plans of Forthac prison ships, their security systems, and their patrol routes. The more he learned, the more impossible the mission seemed. The Iron Claw was a massive ship, 3 kilometers long and heavily armored. It carried a crew of 10,000 Forthac soldiers and had enough weapons to destroy a small moon. The prison section was in the center of the ship, surrounded by multiple layers of security. "The good news," said Dr. Park, the head technician, "is that we've managed to get our hands on some Forthac stealth technology. Your ship will be practically invisible to their sensors." "And the bad news?" Marcus asked. "Everything else," Dr. Park replied with a weak smile. "Getting to the ship undetected is possible. Getting inside will be difficult. Getting the princess out alive and escaping, well, let's just say you'll need a lot of luck." Marcus nodded. He had never been a lucky person, but he had learned to make his own luck through careful planning and stubborn determination. The final part of his briefing came from an unexpected source. Queen Thessara herself appeared on the communication screen, her image transmitted across the galaxy from Ethos. Marcus had never seen an Aetherone before, and he was struck by how delicate and graceful she looked. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow with inner light, and her large eyes held a depth of emotion that reminded him of deep water. "Sergeant Chen," the Queen said, her voice soft but clear, "I want to thank you for volunteering to help my daughter. I know this is dangerous for you." Marcus stood straighter. "Your Majesty, I give you my word that I will do everything I can to bring your daughter home." The Queen smiled, and for a moment Marcus felt something strange. A warmth in his mind, like gentle fingers touching his thoughts. It only lasted a second, but in that time, he felt the Queen's gratitude and her desperate love for her child. "I can see why the humans are valued allies," the Queen said. "There is a strength in your people that goes beyond physical power. You understand what it means to protect those who cannot protect themselves. After the communication ended, Marcus spent the rest of the day preparing for the mission. He checked his equipment, studied the ship plans one more time, and tried not to think about the fact that he would probably die in the next few days. That night, he sat alone in his quarters and wrote a letter he hoped no one would ever have to read. In it, he tried to explain why he had to take this mission, why saving one alien child was worth risking his life. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he had made to himself to never let anyone else suffer the way his family had suffered. As he sealed the letter, Marcus felt something he had not experienced in years: peace. For the first time since losing his sister, he was doing exactly what he was supposed to do. Tomorrow, he would begin the long journey to Forthac space. Tomorrow he would try to save a princess he had never met. Tomorrow he would finally have a chance to keep the promise he had made to his sister's memory. He was ready. Marcus's ship drifted through the darkness of space like a ghost. The stealth technology made it nearly invisible, but Marcus knew that nearly invisible was not the same as completely safe. One mistake, one sensor sweep at the wrong moment, and the entire Forthac fleet would come hunting for him. It had taken him 3 weeks to reach the outer edge of Forthac territory. 3 weeks of traveling through empty space, checking and rechecking his equipment and trying not to think about all the ways this mission could go wrong. The human coalition had given him the best ship they could manage on short notice, but it was still just a small scout vessel against an entire enemy empire. Marcus studied the scanner display in front of him. According to his intelligence reports, the Iron Claw was somewhere in this sector, moving along a patrol route that would take it past 3 different Forthac military bases. The prison ship never stayed in one place for more than a few hours, making it almost impossible to intercept. But Marcus had patience. He had learned long ago that most battles were won by the person who was willing to wait the longest. He set his ship to passive scanning mode and settled into watch. On the second day he found them. The Iron Claw appeared on his long-range sensors like a mountain floating in space. It was even bigger than the intelligence reports had suggested, surrounded by a convoy of smaller warships. Marcus counted at least 20 escort vessels, each one capable of destroying his little scout ship with a single shot. Marcus watched the convoy for several hours, studying their movement patterns and communication frequencies. The Forthac were efficient but predictable. They followed standard military procedures, which meant they had weaknesses that could be exploited by someone who understood how they thought. The opportunity came when the convoy stopped to refuel at an automated station. The escort ship spread out in a defensive pattern, while the Iron Claw docked with the fuel platform. For 30 minutes, the prison ship would be stationary and partially shielded by the station's bulk. Marcus powered up his engines and began his approach. The stealth systems kept him hidden, but he had to move slowly to avoid creating heat signatures that might be detected. Every minute felt like an hour as he crept closer to the massive prison ship. Getting inside was the hardest part. Marcus had studied the ship's design for weeks, looking for any weakness he could exploit. The answer came from an unexpected source: waste disposal. Even a prison ship had to get rid of garbage, and the disposal chutes were too small for the Forthac to consider them a security risk. Marcus parked his ship next to one of the disposal ports and began the dangerous process of cutting through the outer hull. The work had to be done carefully to avoid setting off internal sensors. One wrong move and alarms would start screaming throughout the ship. It took him 2 hours to create an opening large enough to crawl through. Marcus squeezed into the narrow chute, his body armor scraping against the metal walls. The space was barely wide enough for a human, which explained why the Forthac had not bothered to guard it. The chute led to a processing center where waste was sorted and recycled. Marcus dropped down into the room and quickly found a place to hide behind a large machinery unit. According to his ship plans, the prison section was 12 levels up and half a kilometer toward the center of the ship. Moving through the Iron Claw was like traveling through a nightmare. The corridors were wide enough for the massive Forthac soldiers, which made Marcus feel like a child walking through a giant's house. The walls were made of dark metal that seemed to absorb light, and the air smelled of oil and something else that Marcus could not identify but did not like. He stayed in the maintenance tunnels whenever possible, following power cables and air ducts toward the prison section. Twice he had to hide when Forthac patrols passed by, their heavy footsteps echoing through the ship like thunder. The prison section was exactly as bad as Marcus had expected. The cells were small metal boxes with barely enough room for a person to lie down. The Forthac clearly believed that prisoners should suffer, not just be contained. Marcus moved carefully through the corridors, checking each cell as he passed. He found Princess Lyrelei in a cell near the center of the block. She was curled up in the corner, her pale blue skin now looking gray and sick. Her long hair was tangled and dirty, and her beautiful robes had been replaced with rough prison clothing. But what struck Marcus most was how alone she looked. The Ethrani were telepaths who lived their entire lives connected to each other's minds. Being cut off from that connection must have been like losing her sight and hearing at the same time. Marcus could see the neural suppressor attached to the back of her neck, a ugly metal device that was designed to block telepathic abilities. "Princess," Marcus whispered, as he worked on the cell lock. "I'm here to take you home." Lyrelei looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. She had probably never seen a human before, and Marcus realized he must look just as alien to her as the Forthac did to him. But then she saw something in his face that made her relax slightly. "You are not Forthac," she said in careful standard language. Her voice was weak but clear. "No," Marcus replied as the lock clicked open. "I'm human. My name is Marcus Chen. Your mother sent me to find you." At the mention of her mother, Lyrelei began to cry. The tears rolled down her blue cheeks like drops of silver. Marcus felt his heart break a little as he helped her stand up. She was so young, probably no older than his sister had been when she was taken. "Can you walk?" Marcus asked gently. Lyrelei nodded, though she had to lean against the wall for support. "The neural suppressor makes me weak. I cannot hear my people's thoughts anymore. It is like being deaf and blind at the same time." Marcus understood. He had read about Ethrani telepathy in the mission briefings. For them, losing mental contact was worse than physical torture. "I'm going to get that thing off you as soon as we're safe. But right now we need to move." Getting out of the prison section was harder than getting in. Marcus had to support Lyrelei as they moved through the corridors, and she was not used to moving quietly. Every sound seemed loud enough to wake the entire ship. They were halfway to the disposal chute when the alarm started. The sound was deafening, a harsh wailing that echoed through every corridor of the ship. Red lights flashed and Marcus could hear the sound of running feet as Forthac soldiers responded to the emergency. "They know I'm gone," Lyrelei said, her voice filled with fear. Marcus pulled her into an alcove as a squad of soldiers ran past. "Maybe, or maybe they found my ship. Either way, we need to find another way out." The original escape route was now impossible. The disposal chute would be guarded and every exit from the ship would be watched. Marcus thought quickly, going through everything he knew about Forthac ship design. "The shuttle bay," he said finally. "If we can get to one of their small ships, we might be able to fight our way out." It was a desperate plan, but it was better than trying to hide on the ship until they were caught. Marcus led Lyrelei through a maze of maintenance corridors, following signs toward the shuttle bay. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of soldiers searching the ship room by room. The shuttle bay was a huge space filled with small Forthac warships. Each one was designed for short-range missions and could easily outrun Marcus's scout ship. The problem was that the bay was full of technicians and pilots preparing for launch. Marcus studied the situation from the entrance. There were at least 50 Forthac in the bay, and all of them would be armed. Even with his military training, the odds were not good. "I have an idea," Lyrelei said quietly. "The neural suppressor blocks my strongest abilities, but I can still sense emotions if I concentrate. I can tell you where the guards are looking. It was not much, but it was better than going in blind." Marcus chose a small, fast-looking shuttle near the back of the bay. He and Lyrelei moved carefully between the larger ships, using Lyrelei's limited telepathy to avoid being seen. They were almost to their target when a Forthac technician spotted them. The alien's red eyes went wide with surprise and he opened his mouth to shout a warning. Marcus moved faster than he had ever moved before. He crossed the distance between them in 3 quick steps and knocked the Forthac unconscious before he could make a sound. But the damage was done. Other technicians had seen the fight and now they were all reaching for weapons. "Run!" Marcus shouted, grabbing Lyrelei's hand and pulling her toward the shuttle. The next few minutes were chaos. Marcus fought his way through the Forthac crew while Lyrelei tried to start the shuttle. Energy bolts flew through the air and Marcus felt one burn across his shoulder as he dove for cover. "I cannot operate this ship," Lyrelei called out. "The controls are designed for Forthac hands." Marcus slid into the pilot's seat, his fingers flying over the alien controls. Fortunately, all ships worked on the same basic principles, and Marcus had studied Forthac technology during his mission preparation. The engines came to life with a roar that filled the shuttle bay. "Hold on," Marcus warned as he lifted the shuttle off the deck. The bay doors were closed, but Marcus did not slow down. He aimed the shuttle at the metal barrier and fired every weapon the small ship had. The doors exploded outward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The shuttle shot out into space like a bullet fired from a gun. The stolen Forthac shuttle raced through space with the entire enemy fleet behind it. Marcus pushed the small ship harder than it was designed to go, the engines screaming in protest as he tried to reach the edge of Forthac territory. Behind them, dozens of warships were gaining ground with every passing minute. "They are getting closer," Princess Lyrelay said from the co-pilot seat. She was still weak from her imprisonment, but she was trying to help by monitoring the sensor displays. "I count 37 ships now," Marcus nodded grimly. The Forthac had called in reinforcements from 3 different military bases. What had started as a simple rescue mission was now turning into the largest space chase in recent history. The aliens were not going to let their prize prisoner escape without a fight. "Can you feel their emotions?" Marcus asked as he made a sharp turn to avoid a missile. "Does your telepathy work on them at all?" Lyrelay closed her eyes and concentrated. The neural suppressor was still attached to her neck, but she was slowly learning to work around its effects. "Their minds are strange. Very focused on anger and hunting. They see this as a personal insult to their empire." Marcus was not surprised. The Forthac were known for their pride and their need to show strength. Having a single human steal their most important prisoner would be seen as a humiliation that had to be answered with overwhelming force. The shuttle shook as another energy blast passed close by. Marcus checked the damage display and saw that they had lost one of their rear shields. The little ship was tough, but it was not built to fight an entire fleet. "How long until we reach human space?" Lyrelay asked. Marcus looked at the navigation display and felt his heart sink. 18 hours at our current speed, but I don't think this ship will last that long." As if to prove his point, another blast struck them directly. The shuttle spun wildly before Marcus could regain control. Sparks flew from damaged control panels and the smell of burning circuits filled the air. Lyrelay looked at Marcus with growing understanding. "We are not going to make it, are we?" Marcus wanted to lie to her, to tell her that everything would be fine. But he had always believed in telling the truth even when it was hard to hear. "The odds are not good, but I'm not giving up. Your mother is waiting for you to come home." The mention of her mother made Lyrelay's eyes fill with tears again. She must be so worried. "The connection between us has been broken since they put this device on me. She does not even know if I am alive." Marcus felt a surge of anger at the thought of a mother not knowing what had happened to her child. It reminded him too much of his own parents, who had never learned what happened to Sarah. He pushed the shuttle's engines even harder, ignoring the warning lights that were flashing all over the control panel. They flew through an asteroid field, using the rocks for cover while the Forthac ships had to slow down to avoid collisions. Marcus piloted the shuttle between asteroids that were sometimes only meters apart, his hands steady despite the impossible speeds they were traveling. "How do you do that?" Lyrelay asked in amazement as they slipped between 2 massive rocks with centimeters to spare. "Your reflexes are faster than any being I've ever seen." "Practice," Marcus replied. "And desperation. When you really need to save someone, you find abilities you never knew you had." They gained some distance in the asteroid field, but as soon as they reached open space, the Forthac ships caught up again. This time they had learned from Marcus's tactics. Instead of chasing directly behind, they spread out in a wide net, trying to surround the shuttle. Marcus saw the trap forming and knew they had only minutes before it closed around them. He looked at the fuel gauge and saw that they had used more than half their energy getting this far. Even if they could escape the immediate pursuit, they would never reach human space, Princess, Marcus said quietly. "I need you to listen to me carefully." Lyrelay looked at him and saw something in his expression that made her afraid. "What are you thinking?" Marcus reached under his seat and pulled out an emergency pod beacon. It was a small device designed to call for help if a ship was destroyed. "This beacon will broadcast your location to any human ships in the area. There's a patrol fleet about 6 hours from here. If they receive the signal, they can come get you." "What about you?" Lyrelay asked, though she already knew the answer. Marcus began programming the shuttle's autopilot. I'm going to set this ship to fly toward the Forthac fleet while you escape in the emergency pod. The shuttle has enough weapons left to keep them busy for a while. No, Lyrelay said, grabbing his arm. You cannot sacrifice yourself for me. I will not let you die. Marcus looked at her with gentle eyes. Princess, this is why I came here. Not just to rescue you, but to make sure you get home safely. Your mother needs you. Your people need you. And what about your people? Do they not need you too? Marcus thought about the human coalition base where he had lived for the past 5 years. He had friends there, fellow soldiers who would miss him. But he had no family waiting for him. No one who would feel the same desperate grief that Queen Thessara was feeling now. I lost my sister when I was young, Marcus said. I couldn't save her, but I can save you. That has to be enough. Lyrelay was crying now, her tears flowing freely down her blue cheeks. Through her damaged telepathic abilities, she could sense the pain and determination in Marcus's mind. She understood that this human soldier carried a wound that would never fully heal, and that saving her was his way of finding peace. There has to be another way, she said desperately. Marcus checked the sensors and saw that the Forthac ships were almost in position to surround them. In a few more minutes, there would be no escape for either of them. He made his decision and began preparing the emergency pod. Princess, I need you to get in the pod now. That's an order? Lyrelay looked at him with new understanding. Despite his gentle manner, Marcus was a soldier, trained to make hard decisions in impossible situations. She could see the military discipline that had kept him alive through years of dangerous missions, but she could also see something else. The same protective instinct that had driven him across the galaxy to save a stranger's child. The willingness to sacrifice everything for someone he cared about, even someone he had just met. You are a good man, Marcus Chen, Lyrelay said as she climbed into the emergency pod. My mother was right to trust your people. Marcus sealed the pod and prepared to launch it. Through the small window, Lyrelay could see his face as he gave her one last smile. Tell your mother that you're safe. Tell her that I kept my promise. The pod shot away from the shuttle just as the Forthac ships closed their trap. Marcus turned the shuttle toward the enemy fleet and armed every weapon the small ship had left. He was outnumbered 100 to 1, but he had bought Lyrelay the time she needed to escape. The battle was brief, but fierce. Marcus fought like a man with nothing left to lose, diving between the enemy ships and striking at their weak points. He managed to damage 3 Forthac vessels before his shields finally failed. But even as his ship began to break apart around him, Marcus felt something he had not experienced in years: peace. For the first time since losing Sarah, he had managed to save someone who needed saving. He had kept his promise to a mother he barely knew, and he had given a young girl the chance to go home. The shuttle exploded in a flash of light that could be seen for millions of kilometers. The Forthac ships stopped their pursuit and began searching for wreckage, but they found no trace of Princess Lyrelay. The emergency pod was too small to detect among the debris, and it was already broadcasting its distress signal toward human space. Hours later, a human patrol ship picked up the signal and found the pod drifting in empty space. Inside, they found a traumatized but alive Ethrani princess, clutching a letter that Marcus had written during his final moments. The letter was simple and direct, like the man who had written it. It contained Marcus's service record, his request that his personal effects be donated to military families, and one final message for Queen Thessara. Your Majesty, the letter read, your daughter is safe. She is brave and strong, and she never gave up hope of seeing you again. Please tell her that saving her was the greatest honor of my life. Please tell her that some promises are worth dying for. But Marcus Chen was not quite dead yet. The explosion had destroyed most of his shuttle, but the emergency systems had managed to protect the pilot's compartment. Marcus was unconscious and badly injured, drifting in a piece of wreckage that the Forthac scanners could not distinguish from ordinary debris. A human coalition search and rescue ship found him 3 days later, barely alive but still breathing. As the medical team worked to save his life, Marcus dreamed of a young girl with silver tears running down blue cheeks, finally going home to her mother. He had kept his promise. That was all that mattered. The emergency pod carrying Princess Lyrelay reached Ethos 3 days after Marcus's sacrifice. Queen Thessara stood in the landing bay of the royal palace, surrounded by doctors and guards, her heart beating so fast she thought it might burst. She had felt her daughter's presence return to the telepathic network hours ago, but she would not truly believe it until she could hold Lyrelay in her arms. The pod's door opened with a soft hiss, and Princess Lyrelay stumbled out into the gentle light of her home world. She looked terrible. Her clothes were torn, her hair was tangled, and the ugly metal neural suppressor still clung to her neck like a parasite. But she was alive, and she was home. "Mother," Lyrelay whispered, and then she was running across the landing bay. Queen Thesara caught her daughter in her arms and held her tight, both of them crying with relief and joy. For a long moment, neither of them could speak. They just stood there, mother and child reunited, while the telepathic bond between them slowly began to heal. "I thought I had lost you forever," the Queen said through her tears. "When the connection was broken, I felt like part of my soul had been torn away." "I know, Mother. I felt it too. But he came for me. The human soldier came for me, just like you said he would." Queen Thesara pulled back to look at her daughter's face. "Where is Sergeant Chen? Is he with the rescue fleet?" Lyrelay's expression changed, and new tears began to flow down her cheeks. These were different tears, filled with grief instead of joy. "He is gone, Mother. He saved me, but he did not survive." The Queen felt her heart break all over again. She had hoped that somehow the brave human who had volunteered for this impossible mission would find a way to survive. But deep down she had known that saving Lyrelay would probably cost him his life. "Tell me what happened," she said gently. As the palace doctors worked to remove the neural suppressor, Lyrelay told her mother the whole story. She described Marcus's gentle kindness when he found her in the prison cell, his determination during their escape, and his final sacrifice to ensure she could reach safety. "He gave me this," Lyrelay said, handing her mother the letter Marcus had written. "He wanted you to know that he kept his promise." Queen Thesara read the letter with trembling hands. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of absolute sincerity. This human soldier had given his life for her daughter without asking for anything in return. He had done it simply because it was the right thing to do. "We must honor his sacrifice," the Queen said. "The entire galaxy should know what this man did." But even as she spoke those words, a communication came in from the human coalition. The message was brief but stunning. Sergeant Marcus Chen had been found alive in the wreckage of his shuttle. He was badly injured and unconscious, but the human doctors believed he would survive. "Mother," Lyrelay said urgently, "we have to bring him here. Our medical technology is better than theirs. We can save him." Queen Thesara did not hesitate. "Prepare the fastest ship we have. I want Sergeant Chen brought to Ethos immediately, and send our best healers with the ship." The rescue mission took 2 weeks. Marcus was transferred to an Ethrani medical ship and brought to the royal palace, where the finest doctors on the planet worked around the clock to save his life. His injuries were severe: broken bones, internal bleeding, and brain trauma from the explosion. Any other species would have died from such wounds. But humans, the doctors learned, were remarkably difficult to kill. Marcus slept for 3 weeks while his body healed. During that time, Princess Lyrelay visited him every day. She would sit beside his bed and tell him stories about Ethos, about the crystal cities and the singing gardens. She talked about her mother and her people, about the peace they had known before the Forthac came. Sometimes she would touch his hand and try to share her thoughts with him, even though he could not respond. She wanted him to know that he was not alone, that someone was watching over him the way he had watched over her. Queen Thesara also came to visit, though less frequently. She would stand at the foot of his bed and study his face, trying to understand what kind of person would risk everything for a stranger's child. His features were strong but gentle, and even in sleep there was something determined about his expression. "The doctors say he dreams," Lyrelay told her mother during one visit. "They think he is reliving the rescue mission over and over again. Perhaps he needs to know that it is truly over," the Queen replied. That he succeeded. On a quiet morning in late spring, Marcus Chen opened his eyes for the first time in 3 weeks. The room was filled with soft, natural light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. For a moment he thought he was still dreaming. Nothing hurt, and he felt stronger than he had in months. "You are awake," said a familiar voice. Marcus turned his head and saw Princess Lyrelay sitting in a chair beside his bed. She looked completely different from the frightened, broken girl he had found in the Forthac prison. Her blue skin glowed with health, her hair was clean and shining, and she wore robes of pure white that seemed to shimmer in the light. "Princess?" Marcus said, his voice rough from disuse. Are you safe? Are you home? Lyrelay smiled, and it was like watching the sun come up. Yes, thanks to you. I am home, I am safe, and my mother is waiting to meet you properly. Marcus tried to sit up, but Lyrelay gently pushed him back down. You must rest. You have been very sick. Our doctors say you should have died from your injuries, but humans are apparently too stubborn to die easily. I feel fine, Marcus said, and he realized it was true. Whatever the Ethrani doctors had done, it had healed him completely. How long have I been here? 3 weeks. You have been unconscious the whole time, but we have been taking care of you. It was the least we could do after what you did for me. Marcus looked around the room and saw that it was unlike any hospital he had ever been in. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that gave off its own light, and there were plants growing everywhere, their leaves humming with quiet music. Everything was designed to promote healing and peace. This is Ethos? He asked. This is the royal palace, Lyrelay replied. Mother insisted that you be brought here. She wanted to make sure you received the best care possible. Before Marcus could respond, the door opened and Queen Thessera entered the room. She moved with the same grace that Marcus remembered from their brief communication, but now he could see her clearly. She was tall and elegant, with an ageless face that spoke of wisdom and compassion, but what struck him most were her eyes, which held depths of gratitude that he could feel even without telepathy. Sergeant Chen, the Queen said, approaching his bed, I owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You gave me back my daughter and my future. How can I thank you for such a gift? Marcus felt uncomfortable with her gratitude. He had only done what any decent person would do in the same situation. Your Majesty, I was just doing my job. Any soldier would have done the same thing. Queen Thessera exchanged a look with her daughter, and both of them smiled. I think you will find that very few beings in the galaxy would risk their lives for a stranger's child. What you did was extraordinary. It did not feel extraordinary, Marcus said honestly. It felt necessary. The Queen sat down in another chair beside his bed. May I ask you something personal, Sergeant? What drove you to volunteer for this mission? Why did you risk everything for people you had never met? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, thinking about how to answer. Finally, he decided on the truth. I had a sister once. She was taken by raiders when we were young. I couldn't save her. I suppose I've been trying to make up for that failure ever since. Queen Thessera reached out and gently touched his hand. For a moment, Marcus felt something warm and comforting flow through him, like a gentle voice telling him that everything was going to be all right. You are not responsible for your sister's fate, the Queen said softly. And by saving my daughter, you have honored her memory in the most beautiful way possible. Marcus felt tears start to form in his eyes. It was something he had needed to hear for years, but had never believed until now. Thank you, he whispered. Princess Lyrelay stood up and moved closer to the bed. Mother and I have been talking while you were recovering. We want to ask you something important. Marcus looked between them, curious and a little nervous. We would like you to stay on Ethos, the Queen said. Not as a guest, but as family. You saved my daughter's life, which makes you as precious to me as a son. If you are willing, we would like to formally adopt you into the royal family. Marcus stared at them in shock. I don't know what to say. I'm just a soldier. I'm not royalty. You are a hero, Lyrelay said firmly. You are the person who brought me home to my mother. That makes you the most important person in our family. Marcus felt overwhelmed by their kindness. For so many years he had been alone, carrying his guilt and his grief like stones in his heart. Now these people were offering him something he had never expected to find again. A family. I would be honored, he said finally. But I need to know something first. Are you sure this is what you want? I'm not Ethrani. I can't share thoughts or connect minds the way you do. Queen Thessera smiled. Sergeant Chen, you shared something far more important with my daughter than thoughts. You shared your courage, your compassion, and your willingness to sacrifice for others.